when someone types something in today's world, they're not just searching for me, they're looking to create with me. Create me a song in the style of fill-in-the-blank creator. And so that becomes a thing that you ultimately need to protect, and something that you need to have your arms around. And it's also not just for the most famous creators in the world. It is for every human on the planet, in our opinion. It's like, this is something that's going to matter, because we will all have synthetic things created of us, AI things created of us. Some will say, yes, it's okay, and some will say, no, it's not.
I'm Ryan Heath, and welcome to the AI Leadership Lab, where I interview C-suite leaders about their AI journeys. We cover what's working, where they're getting stuck, how they pivot, and the lessons they take from the losses. Hey everyone, I'm Ryan Heath, and welcome back to AI Leadership Lab, where I interview C-suite leaders about their AI journeys. We cover what's working, where they're getting stuck, how they pivot, and the lessons they take from those changes. Joining us now, live from Web Summit in Lisbon, is Dan Neely, CEO of Vermillio, an AI platform for protecting and monetizing intellectual property. Welcome to the podcast, Dan.
Hey, it's great to be here, Ryan. Thanks for having me.
You're very, very welcome. Maybe let's start with how we protect the work of creatives. Vermillio was doing AI before it was cool and everywhere. And you've definitely earned recognition as a rights management platform that is protecting creators' work and likeness. In your mind, what's the first thing creators should do if they want to protect their work in this new AI landscape?
The first thing is just thinking about likeness. Most creators don't think about likeness. They think about the output that they have. They don't think about their image, their name, etc. They think about the creative thing that they have built or invented or created over time. That's what they think about creating. Often it's a piece of music, or it could be a film, or it could be a script. When you think about likeness, it is ultimately the essence of who you are.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to the first thing you should do is, okay, I need to think about where and how might this be used in some nefarious way.
Yeah. And is that about renegotiating a contract in a clever way? Is it about creating avatars and protecting your voice?
I think it's a number of things. So certainly contractually, most creators are often in a work for hire setting rather than being something where this is an asset that they can have or a thing that they can have. But I think it's a frame of mind. It's a frame of mind which says, I have a likeness. When someone types something in today's world, they're not just searching for me, they're looking to create with me.
Yeah.
Right? You create me a song in the style of fill-in-the-blank creator. And so that becomes a thing that you ultimately need to protect, and something that you need to have your arms around.
Yeah.
And it's also not just for the most famous creators in the world. It is for every human on the planet, in our opinion. Is this is something that's going to matter, because we will all have synthetic things created of us, AI things created of us. Yeah. Some will say, yes, it's okay, and some will say, no, it's not.
You're right. One of my favorite ways to use chatbots at the moment is I say, I'm the journalist Ryan Heath, and I know there's 3 million words in my name that are out there that they've trained on. Right. So that's the great way to get stuff happening in a quick way for me. Now, we're also in a world of deep fakes and other sort of AI threats. You've just had things like Sora 2 land on the industry and the environment that you're operating in. How should we think about those sort of levels of changes and disruptions?
The disruption has been gradual over time. So we've been in this for a while now, so almost 5 years. The change over time has been video was horrendous, and now video is amazing. So the fact that I can create a video with a simple prompt of arguably anything and anyone in the world is an amazing thing, but it's also a very challenging thing. And so when that happens, you're in a place of okay, so Sora 2 can now create the likeness of any individual. When they first came out, they had this mess around opting in and opting out. And so they feel like they've got to a different place. But one of the most interesting things on launch was it was about characters and likeness. So it was about minions, and it was about someone's voice, someone's famous voice, someone's famous face. They separated those two things, which in the world of content has never really been done before. Right? When you think about Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man, you think about those two things being coexisting together. But as a fan, you expect Robert Downey Jr. to show up when you create Iron Man. And so who has the rights to do what in that setting? Who has the right to say yes, and who has the right to say no? Marvel, Disney would say, hey, we've got the rights around this specific, around Iron Man. Robert Downey Jr. would say, I own my name, image, and likeness. And so it's this really complex.
And what if you want Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man dressed as a drag queen? Does he have the rights to say, hey, I don't want to appear in that way? Do those sort of questions come up when you start the mashing of different worlds and ideas?
Certainly. When we think about building guardrails, it has to be about use case. We can't just allow people to do anything and everything. The good news is co-creation by fans.
Yeah.
They're generally looking to create something in the ecosystem that they operate in.
Yeah.
I'm looking to create something in the Marvel universe. I'm not looking to create something in someone else's universe.
And they generally respect you in some way, which doesn't mean they're always going to pay, but they can probably be convinced to pay at some level.
Absolutely. Most people, when it gets to a place of like, hey, you know what, this is unique enough, this is a thing that I care about, we'll pay for it. Yeah. We've seen that when you get to co-create, so we did a series of work with David Gilmour of Pink Floyd, when you get to co-create with someone like David Gilmour, right, you are willing to pay more than you would normally pay because you've got to co-create and you're a fan of his. Yeah. You've lived the journey of who he is. That becomes a real thing.
Yeah. Now, when we think about monetizing the work of creative folks, you know, one thing I've always had in mind, and I think I was a little bit unusual, where as an author, I didn't really care how much money I got from the books because I realized quickly that there could be other income streams. And so I came to understand the books as like the window display that then lets people hire you to talk at their conference or something like that. Sure. And so like I ended up making more money from speaking at conferences than my first book is the example there. I wonder what the example is in your world where you're kind of like educating and training people or opening up new ways for them to monetize their work. What does that feel like?
So that feels like, likeness is certainly we talked about likeness. Why do you want to protect your likeness? Because ultimately your likeness is going to be used in a bunch of ways. Very directly, I want an exact replica of you, all the way to, no, I'm actually going to use a bit of you in some output. I'm going to describe it, and it's actually an entire universe, and reality is I've used a little bit of you. You should get to participate in all of that. It becomes this very big passive income gain. Yeah. Right? Which is, I've been used in the data. My likeness has been used. People are using me in prompts. I should therefore get to participate in the economic story that follows.
Yes.
And so it's very similar to, as you talk about, a book, right? So a book now becomes a training data asset that arguably at some point you should participate in.
I'm part of the Anthropic class action, don't worry.
So you're in that mix. And so as you think about the participation, it's a great example of like, well, we got to see real monetization. But the place it has to get to is where we think about pennies on trillions of transactions. Yes. Right? You getting passive income coming to you, that's ultimately how we think about it getting managed.
And then how about different actors in that ecosystem? So we've spoken now about what creators should be doing to protect themselves. Yeah. Like what's the role of a studio, whether that's like TV, movie, music, you know, the people who do the production, let's say, like what role do they have to play in kind of safeguarding sort of a system that works for their creators or making sure that their talent is happy, let's say?
Yeah, I would say there's a big debate going on there right now with regards to who is responsible for this moment. Yeah. Is it the fact that you've hired a series of actors and they're starring in a feature film? Should you have some responsibility as studio to protect the use of that in many, many places? There's people that have argued that. Should it simply be the responsibility of these platforms that are allowing the content to be created? Should it be the responsibility of the actual talent themselves? Yeah. So that's as we think about it, you know, there's a series of discussions going on there. But as the studio, you know, again, it's this very interesting moment. Again, I'll come back to likeness. Yeah. Likeness is this thing that's never really been negotiated around outside of a specific project. Yeah. I get to use your likeness in the context of marketing a movie, marketing a series of music, an album that we're launching. But outside of that, I don't really have any rights. So it's going to become this really complex thing inside anyone that creates content that ultimately uses some form of likeness in it.
Yeah. Yeah, that intuitively sounds very logical. Do you have a vision of how that kind of like maturity curve works for people understanding and monetizing likeness, or are you fumbling in the dark as well?
So we have a specific point of view, which is once you're protected, you've created ultimate optionality for yourself. I can now monetize or not. I could choose to never monetize my likeness. Yep. No one can ever use it, and then our system will help manage kind of taking things down. Great. But then the instance where most people are going to want to get to a place where they participate in the economics, it is hey, how do you manage your own likeness, and how do you make sure you have opted it into these various deals? The big complexity is the platforms on the other side of this don't want to go and have 3,000, 30,000 conversations with a bunch of different people to try and negotiate that. So there has to be a place where we can do this in more broad brushstrokes. Yep. So perhaps that says it should be the studios that help manage that, the labels that help manage that in music, or should it be the lawyers that are responsible for the entertainment ecosystem? Is that a centralized place? Yep. Is it the agents? Is it the managers? So who is ultimately responsible for kind of putting this group together is definitely still undecided. Yep. And in any new technology, there's a bunch of land grabbing going on. 100%. And so as the land grab happens, for us as a company, it's about how do we just enable to make it super easy? Yep. Because otherwise it truly will be in contracting hell for a long time.
Yeah. I mean, I think that land grab point is absolutely correct. And it makes me think back to like previous generations of digital technology. And I'm thinking kind of both social media and like the model that powers Google, for example. Yeah. So that it's like very clear that, if you think about Google and Meta, we ended up with a system where they ended up doing deals with publishers, for example, where they eventually had to admit we're basically news publishers.
Yes.
So we have to have some responsibility in that ecosystem. And you can sort of see it won't play out the exact same way, but I feel like the model providers will be in the same spot.
Very similar. So I think so we actually rewind all the way back to kind of the beginning of advertising on the internet, right?
Yeah.
You had a bunch of people making land grabs to go and buy banner ads, a large bunch of them, so they could arbitrage the market, buy them at $10 and sell them for $50. But in moving through that process, we then eventually got to a place that DoubleClick happened.
Yep.
And as a result of DoubleClick happening, we now started to have something that was systematized. We actually had these easy ways of doing stuff, rather than hard ways, and we're still in that messy middle moment.
Well, then that gets me to one of the technical questions I had, which is around your Trace ID system.
Yeah.
Explain to the listeners what that is and why it was important for you to develop that.
Yeah, so it's important because, first of all, I'm going to start again.
Yeah.
It's important because when we think about protection in this space, it is not about a one-to-one replica. So I've got a piece of music, have I found it on YouTube? Right? YouTube has this technology that can help solve that problem, but it's only a one-to-one match. This is a technology where we have to start finding ingredients in outputs. So it's a very hard technical problem to say, how much of my IP exists in this output? Is it 1% or is it 100%? So same with likeness. And so as we look at that, it's like, okay, that fingerprinting technology, we call it neural fingerprint, allows us to go and detect across the entire internet where stuff has been distributed that's been created by the AI platforms that contains intellectual property.
Yeah.
Whether it be copyright or your likeness. Great. It also allows us to understand what the model's knowledge is that they perhaps should not have. They have knowledge of content that they shouldn't have.
Yeah.
And so it allows us to look at the models as well. If you go forward, it will also allow, we're not there yet from an industry, it will also allow us to exist between the prompt and the output.
Yeah.
So a user puts a prompt in, there's a set of rules, which are the Trace ID rules, that say this can be created or it cannot be created.
Yeah.
And it allows us to manage as a third party the rules that the IP ecosystem have said, this can happen and this cannot happen.
Yeah.
I would argue those shouldn't be inside a company like OpenAI or an Anthropic. They should exist in a third party capacity.
Yeah.
And those arguments,
I think you're right, because otherwise you end up in a zone of lawsuits for the stuff that shouldn't be created, but does get created.
in lawsuits, I think you also give a major economic advantage to the platforms.
Yeah.
But Content ID, while YouTube will say it's an amazing solution, it is an amazing solution. It took 15 years to get to be amazing, but it is a massive economic advantage to YouTube, not the intellectual property holders.
Yes. And there's still ways to hack watermarking.
Watermarking doesn't work in this world.
Yeah.
The old world of fingerprinting doesn't work in this world.
Yeah.
That's why we developed neural fingerprints, so we could actually understand ingredient level data and inputs.
Yep. Now, do you have any advice, and maybe this is for the creators, but for people more generally who feel overwhelmed by the sort of AI choices that are out there or the AI generated threats that they are facing in whatever business line they're in? Like, what's a smart way for people to tackle those challenges?
Yeah. I think so. One is you should think about understanding how much stuff is actually out there. Let's get past I'm worried about it. There's easy ways today for us to figure out, hey, here's how much my stuff is actually being used. So understand that first. That creates really two new options, which are, hey, I want to make sure I protect myself. But two, it's, I've got a set of knowledge and intelligence right now around what my fan base actually cares about.
Yeah.
And the fan base could be 10 people, it could be 10 million people.
Yeah.
But you get to start understanding this is actually how people want to use my content. And it's a set of value that I would argue was typically existed inside major corporations previously.
Yep.
And now exists in a world where you can actually start understanding that, and it's democratized that knowledge.
Yeah.
That becomes pretty interesting.
It becomes very valuable. Like, I think back to, I spent most of my journalism career at Politico, and what a lot of people simply didn't understand about Politico was that most of the content was paywalled and developed in a very specific vertical way for very niche audiences. And because those audiences were small, they weren't considered meaningful to, compared to how many millions of people read the New York Times or the Sun in London or something like that. And Politico's
I think that you took the Sun in London and the New York Times and put them next to each other.
very different papers with very large readerships. But Politico is like a cash machine compared to them and the point here is they understood who their audience was and then were able to deliver content to that fan base.
And I think that set of knowledge is I think Politico is a very good example of it, where you get to a very refined audience, but they're willing to pay large amounts for it.
Yeah.
So you have to be happy with that. And I think that's also the journey that the internet is generally on, which is more things going behind paywall.
Yep.
Because of, yes, we want to make money, but two, we're trying to protect ourselves from just being scraped and the whole Google search issue that's going on. So like there's a bunch of
I'm not a fan of paywalls. I think they should be porous at some level. I don't like that kind of aggressive, you can never see a word from what we do until you hand over everything. But content creators deserve to be paid for what they create. So I believe in that.
And paywalls will shift, right? So the kind of technical shift that we see is it'll shift to, I've typed a prompt into one of these major models.
Yeah.
It needs licenses to pull off the outcome.
Yeah.
The licenses will be done in real time in a paywall fashion that ultimately allows you to get paid. So rather than it being, I've got to be paid $25 a month to do this thing to even get an output from these models, that's either being paid by the model or the user. That's not a world that we're going to be in.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, last question. What are you excited about? And it could be anywhere in the field of AI and in terms of like what's coming next or how you use it.
Yeah. So I think we're getting to a place of where you're going to get to co-create with the things you're a fan of. We're getting to a place where you start to see kind of some of the, whether it be, so lawsuits happened first, legislation tried to happen. Now we're starting to see where people are actually starting to engage, allowing people to license their likeness, allowing people to license the content so that's all kind of business and economics. But now it's like, as a fan, I get to go and co-create with stuff. Like it's the first time you've really been able to co-create at scale. And so when that gets allowed, that becomes a pretty interesting moment because it allows you to get to a place of, you've got music, you've got someone that could be a musician, but now can create music because of the way in which they're allowed to do it. You've got kids that are going to be able to say, I've never been able to draw, but now I can.
Yeah.
And they get to do it in such an amazing way. That to me is like, that's an exciting moment where we've actually had some democratization of the ecosystem.
I love that. I'm going to co-create with some Olympic athletes. That's what I'm going to do. I want my swimming and my gym training done by my favorite Olympic athletes. So
I'm not sure whether done is actually going to solve the problem, but yes.
So you're on notice, LA 28.
Right.
Dan Neely, thank you so much for joining AI Leadership Lab.
Thanks so much, Ryan.
Thanks for listening. 2 things before you go. First, if you'd like to appear on the show or know someone I should have on, you can find me through ryanheathconsulting.com. Finally, please tell a friend or colleague about AI Leadership Lab. Even better, leave a short 5-star rating or review on whatever platform you found this podcast. It'll help us reach more of the people who'd enjoy these tips and tricks. Thanks, and talk soon.